He was a millionaire CEO who denied miracles. Until three angels saved him in a hospital, Ethan Carter was a man the world admired. At 35, he stood at the peak of success, towering above competitors. His company's skyscraper gleamed in the heart of the city, a monument to his ambition. People whispered his name with respect, but also with a quiet fear. He had a reputation for making deals no one else dared to dream of. In boardrooms, his presence was enough to silence a crowd. His words were sharp, calculated, and always final. Employees saw him as untouchable, a man wrapped in steel. But behind the polished suits and confident stride, there was an emptiness he refused to acknowledge. Ethan had built walls so high around his heart that no one dared to climb them. He didn't believe in kindness. He didn't believe in love. And above all, he didn't believe in miracles. To him, the idea of unseen forces guiding life was nonsense. He trusted numbers, not prayers. He relied on contracts, not hopes. Everything could be bought, calculated, or controlled. At least, that's what he believed. When colleagues spoke of luck, he laughed. When friends mentioned faith, he dismissed it. Life isn't about miracles, he would often say. It's about strategy. But for all his wealth and influence, his nights were quiet and cold. He had no family waiting at home. His mansion, though filled with luxury, echoed with silence. He drowned that silence with work, endless work. Contracts became his comfort. Money was his only companion. Power, his only pursuit. Yet in the stillness of midnight, even Ethan felt the weight of loneliness pressing on him. He never admitted it, not even to himself. But deep down, he was a man searching for something he couldn't name. That evening was no different. Rain lashed against the tall glass windows of his office. The city outside was blurred in streaks of water and neon lights. His desk was scattered with files, but his eyes were heavy with fatigue. He rubbed his temples, closing another deal over the phone. "Good," he said coldly. "Wire the funds by morning. No excuses." He hung up, leaned back and glanced at the time. Past midnight. Another day lost to business. He grabbed his coat, ignoring the storm outside. A driver had been offered, but he declined. Ethan preferred control, even behind the wheel. He liked the hum of the engine, the way the city lights reflected off the hood of his luxury car. It reminded him that he was in charge, always in command. The rain poured harder as he pulled onto the slick road. Thunder growled overhead, but he pressed the accelerator anyway. His headlights cut through sheets of water, illuminating the empty streets. Windshield wipers swung furiously, fighting the downpour. Inside, the car was quiet, save for the low growl of the engine. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His mind drifted to numbers, projects, the endless chase of profit. He thought of his rivals and how they envied his empire. He thought of his success, built without anyone's help. And he thought, with a trace of arrogance, that miracles were nothing compared to sheer willpower. A smirk crossed his lips. Miracles, he muttered to himself. A word for the weak. Outside, lightning cracked the sky open. Rain hammered harder against the windshield. Visibility shrank with every passing second. But Ethan pushed forward, unwilling to slow down. His ego whispered that nothing could touch him. The city lights faded as he reached a lonely stretch of road. Trees bent violently in the storm winds. Puddles glistened across the asphalt like dark mirrors. Ethan narrowed his eyes, focused but unafraid. He had faced bigger storms in life, he thought. Deals that could destroy empires, negotiations that crushed the weak. What was a little rain compared to that? He pressed his foot harder on the accelerator. The tires hissed against the wet surface. The car surged forward, slicing through the storm. For a moment, he felt invincible. But nature has a way of humbling even the strongest. A sharp curve appeared ahead. Ethan barely noticed it through the blur of rain. He tried to turn the wheel, but the tires betrayed him. The car hydroplaned, skidding across the flooded road. His heart lurched into his throat. The world outside became a spinning blur of lights and shadows. Metal screamed against the guardrail. Glass shattered, spraying across his face like ice. He gripped the wheel desperately, but control was gone. The luxury vehicle, once a symbol of his power, was now nothing more than a helpless toy in the storm. The tires lifted for a moment as the car spun violently. The roar of thunder was drowned out by the deafening crash of steel. The impact threw him forward, the seatbelt digging into his chest. Pain shot through his body like fire. His head slammed against the side window. Stars exploded in his vision. He gasped, but the air was knocked from his lungs. A taste of blood filled his mouth. The car crumpled like paper, glass raining onto the asphalt. Sparks burst as metal scraped against metal. The world outside was chaos. Storm, fire, and twisted steel. Ethan tried to move, but his body refused. His hands trembled, still clutching the wheel. He could feel the life draining out of him, slow and steady. The arrogance in his heart began to fade, replaced by a cold fear he had never known. He thought of his empire, his wealth, his power. None of it mattered now. All that stood between him and the end was chance. For the first time, Ethan Carter felt small. Raindrops fell through the shattered windshield, soaking his face. The storm outside raged on, merciless. Lightning flashed, casting brief light on his broken form. He coughed, each breath sharp with agony. His vision blurred, fading in and out. He tried to cry out, but his voice was weak, swallowed by thunder. Alone in the wreckage, he realized how fragile life truly was. Not even the strongest CEO could bargain with death. His hand slipped from the wheel, falling limp at his side. Darkness crept in at the edges of his sight. In those last moments of consciousness, a strange thought pierced his mind. Was this it? Was this how it ended? Not with a deal, not with applause, not with triumph, but with silence and broken glass. His chest tightened, his breaths shallower with every second. He wanted to fight, but strength abandoned him. He felt powerless for the first time in decades. His head rested back against the seat, heavy and weak. The storm outside roared, but inside the car, it was eerily still. His eyes fluttered, heavy with the weight of unconsciousness. And then, Ethan's world went dark. A faint sound pierced the silence. Beep, beep, beep. It echoed like a distant heartbeat, pulling Ethan from the depths of darkness. His eyelids felt heavy, glued shut by exhaustion. For a moment he wondered if he had crossed into another world. The scent of antiseptic filled his nose, sharp and sterile. His chest rose and fell with effort, each breath dragging pain through his ribs. Slowly, painfully, his eyes fluttered open. Above him stretched a ceiling painted pure white. Bright lights hummed faintly overhead, almost blinding. Ethan blinked, confusion fogging his mind. His body felt heavy, pinned down by unseen chains. Wires trailed from his chest, connected to machines by his bedside. The steady rhythm of monitors reminded him he was still alive. He tried to move, but even the smallest twitch sent agony through his limbs. His throat was dry, his lips cracked, as if he hadn't spoken in days. With great effort, he turned his head slightly. And that's when he saw them. 3 young girls sat close together near the corner of the hospital bed. Their clothes were simple, damp from the stove. Him outside. Their eyes were wide, filled not with fear, but with concern. Ethan froze, unsure if they were real or fragments of a dream. He stared at them, bewildered. None of them wore hospital uniforms. None of them looked like family. Yet their presence filled the sterile room with warmth. The smallest of the 3 leaned forward, her tiny hands clasped together. She had been watching him breathe, as if guarding every fragile moment. "He's awake," whispered the older girl softly. Her voice trembled, but relief colored her words. Ethan's brows furrowed, his voice hoarse. Who are you?" The effort of speaking felt like lifting mountains. The middle girl straightened her back, her gaze steady. We were there when they brought you in." Her tone was calm, but her eyes shimmered with hidden worry. Ethan tried to piece together the fragments of memory. The rain, the road, the crash, darkness. But these 3 strangers, he couldn't place them. Why? He coughed weakly. Why are you here? The youngest girl, no more than 10, glanced down shyly. She held a folded paper flower in her hand, its edges creased with care. We didn't want you to be alone, she murmured. Ethan's chest tightened, though he didn't understand why. Alone. That word had followed him his entire life. Yet here were 3 children who owed him nothing, refusing to leave his side. He shifted slightly, wincing at the pain that shot through his ribs. You shouldn't, he rasped. Be here. The oldest shook her head, her long hair brushing over her shoulders. No, we wanted to stay. Their voices were gentle, like a lullaby against the cold beeping of machines. Ethan studied their faces, trying to grasp their intentions. Were they waiting for someone else? Did they mistake him for another man? But no, their eyes were fixed on him, filled with quiet care. The room was still, save for the storm tapping against the window. For the first time in years, Ethan felt watched over, not by guards, not by employees, but by something softer. He couldn't name it, but it unsettled him deeply. His heart, usually shielded by walls of arrogance, shifted slightly under their gaze. The youngest girl placed the paper flower on his bedside table. Its bright colors stood out against the sterile whites and grays of the hospital. It's for you, she said timidly. Ethan blinked, unable to comprehend such a gesture. He had received gifts worth millions, but none had felt this personal. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His throat tightened, not from pain, but from something unfamiliar. Gratitude, or perhaps vulnerability. He turned his face slightly, staring at the ceiling again. His pulse raced faster than before. The middle girl leaned closer, cautious. Don't try to move too much. The doctor said you're still weak. Her words were steady, almost protective. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Why would children concern themselves with him? He was a stranger, a broken man lying helpless in a bed. Yet they looked at him as though he mattered. He wanted to scoff, to dismiss them as foolish. But the weakness in his body stripped him of pride. For the first time in his life, he couldn't push people away. The room hummed quietly, machines keeping him tethered to life. Rain tapped against the window, a soft rhythm against the silence. The girls sat patiently, their presence unwavering. Ethan shifted again, testing his limbs. Pain reminded him how fragile he truly was. He groaned, frustrated by his weakness. The oldest girl stood halfway, concerned. Do you need water? She asked. Ethan hesitated, then gave the faintest nod. She carefully lifted the cup from the table, guiding it to his lips. The water was cool, easing his dry throat. Ethan closed his eyes, swallowing with difficulty. When he opened them again, the 3 girls were still watching him closely. Their faces glowed with relief, as if his small sip was a victory. He couldn't understand them. H. He had spent a lifetime surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Deals, favors, money. There was always a price, but these girls asked for nothing. Their presence was unearned, undeserved, and that made it impossible for him to ignore. Why? He whispered again, his voice weak. The middle girl tilted her head. Because no one should be alone when they wake up. The words struck him like a quiet truth. He stared at her, unable to respond. The silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. His hand twitched against the blanket. A small, involuntary motion. The youngest girl noticed, her smile gentle. She reached out, resting her tiny hand lightly on his arm. Her touch was warm, grounding him in a way he couldn't explain. Ethan inhaled shakily, his chest aching. The warmth of that small hand seeped into him, defying the cold machines. He had always thought the world to be cruel, merciless. Yet here, in a sterile hospital room, 3 children had proven him wrong. He shut his eyes, not from weakness, but from an unfamiliar weight pressing in his chest. For the first time in decades, he didn't feel like the mighty CEO. He felt human. The beeping of the monitor steadied, in rhythm with his calmer breath. The storm outside raged on, but inside the room there was peace. Ethan Carter lay still, surrounded not by wealth or power, but by something he had never believed in. And though he couldn't admit it yet, his awakening had already begun. The silence in the hospital room lingered, broken only by the steady beeping of the monitor. Ethan's eyes studied the three young girls again, their faces glowing faintly in the dim light. Something in their presence tugged at him, demanding to be understood. He had to know who they were, these strangers who had stayed through the storm. Gathering his strength, he whispered, "Tell me your names." The oldest girl exchanged a glance with the others, then nodded gently. She straightened her back, her voice steady despite her youth. "I'm Sophie. I'm 14. Her eyes held a seriousness far beyond her age. Ethan felt a strange respect stir inside him. Sophie's hands were folded neatly in her lap. Her hair was damp from the rain, strands clinging to her face. But she didn't seem to notice the discomfort. She carried herself with quiet strength, like someone used to responsibility. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Why did you stay?" Sophie's answer came without hesitation. "Because you were hurt, and we couldn't just leave you." Her voice cracked slightly, but her gaze never faltered. For a moment, Ethan was silent, his throat tight. Few adults had ever spoken to him with such sincerity. Yet here was a child doing it. The middle girl leaned forward eagerly, unable to hold back. "I'm Emma. I'm 12, she said quickly. Her tone was softer, more playful, but filled with earnestness. She fiddled with the edge of the blanket near his hand. "I was the one who found you," she added, her voice low. Ethan blinked, trying to absorb her words. "Found me?" Emma nodded, her curls bouncing lightly as she moved. "You were lying on the road, and no one else was there. I called for help." Her eyes dimmed for a moment, remembering the sight of him broken and still. Ethan's chest tightened with the weight of her words. This little girl, barely in her teens, had been the reason he was even breathing now. He swallowed, emotions unfamiliar and raw rising in his throat. "You saved me," he whispered. Emma's cheeks flushed at the words, and she quickly shook her head. "I just called the ambulance. They saved you." But Ethan knew better. Without her, there would have been no ambulance. No chance. He studied her wide eyes, full of bravery hidden beneath innocence. And for the first time, gratitude formed in his heart. Not for money, not for deals, but for life itself. His gaze softened, surprising even himself. The youngest girl had been quiet, her small hand still resting on his. She finally spoke, her voice gentle as a whisper. "I'm Lily. I'm 10. She looked down shyly, her lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. Ethan's eyes lingered on her tiny frame, so fragile yet so present. "What did you do?" he asked, his tone softer than before. Lily's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I held your hand, and I prayed for you." The simplicity of her words struck him harder than any storm. For a moment, Ethan forgot to breathe. He stared at the girl, stunned by the purity of her answer. She didn't speak of action or bravery or strength. She spoke of something Ethan had never believed in. Faith. "You prayed?" he muttered, his voice hollow. Lily nodded, her small fingers brushing lightly against his arm. "I didn't want you to go away, so I asked God to keep you here." Ethan turned his face toward the ceiling, blinking rapidly. He wanted to scoff, to deny, to laugh as he always did, but the lump in his throat betrayed him. No business deal had ever made him feel this way. His gaze shifted between the three girls. Sophie, the strong one, Emma, the brave one, Lily, the gentle one. Together, they were unlike anything he had ever known. 3 children who risked themselves in a storm for a stranger. 3 children who had given him more than his fortune ever could: life. He tried to speak, but words tangled inside his chest. All he managed was a broken whisper. "Why, me?" Sophie was the one to answer, her tone firm. "Because you needed us." Ethan's heart gave a painful jolt at her certainty. It was a simple truth, yet one he had never allowed himself to hear. He was always the one others needed. He was the one people begged, persuaded, bargained with. But here, in this sterile hospital room, he was the one in need. And 3 children had seen him, not as a CEO, not as a giant, but as a man broken and fragile. He had never felt more exposed, or more seen. Emma leaned closer, her voice softer now. "When I found you, I thought you were gone." She shivered at the memory, her eyes clouding. "But then you breathed again, and I thought, maybe it's not too late." Ethan's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her words wrapped around him like a blanket, unfamiliar, yet comforting. Sophie nodded slowly. "I ran to the ambulance when they got lost. The road was too dark. They almost gave up." She clenched her fists tightly, as if reliving the fear. "But I showed them the way." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. This girl, barely 14, had faced the storm head-on. She had carried a courage most grown men lacked. "You, all of you," he whispered. "You saved me." His voice cracked, betraying the emotion he tried to hide. The girls exchanged shy glances, their cheeks warm with his gratitude. Lily squeezed his hand gently. "We just didn't want you to be alone." The words echoed, pulling at the emptiness inside him. No one had said that to him before. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. He had lived decades denying miracles, mocking the very idea. Yet here, 3 little angels had stood in the storm to give him another chance. They were fragile, innocent, yet their courage dwarfed his empire. He opened his eyes again, staring at their faces, memorizing every detail. Something inside him shifted, subtle but undeniable. He didn't know what to call it yet. Was it gratitude? Was it faith? Or was it the beginning of something he had never allowed himself to feel? The beeping of the machines steadied, as though reflecting the calm inside his chest. The storm outside had eased into a soft drizzle. The room smelled faintly of rain carried in on their clothes. The paper flower still sat on his bedside, untouched yet precious. Ethan let his eyes rest on it, then on the girls once more. "Emma, Sophie, Lily," he whispered their names slowly, tasting them carefully. They lit up at the sound, smiles forming through their shyness. For them, it was just a name spoken. For him, T was the start of something far greater. Ethan Carter had met 3 little angels, and nothing in his life would ever feel the same again. Morning light spilled into the hospital room, soft and golden. Ethan stirred awake, his body heavy, but his heart strangely light. The beeping machines kept him company, yet he waited for something more. A knock at the door broke the silence. 3 familiar faces peeked in, their smiles bright as sunshine. Emma rushed forward first, nearly tripping over her own feet. "We're back," she announced, her voice carrying like a cheerful trumpet. Ethan couldn't help but smile, a smile he hadn't felt in years. Sophie followed with steady steps, her eyes scanning him with concern. "How's the pain today?" she asked, as if she were his personal nurse. He chuckled, though it turned into a cough. "Still here," he admitted, touching his side carefully. Sophie frowned, then nodded as though preparing a battle plan. "Then you fight it. That's what strong people do." Her conviction startled Ethan, yet gave him strength. He found himself nodding, almost obeying her command. Lily trailed behind, clutching something in her hands. Her eyes sparkled as she approached his bed. With a shy smile, she held out a folded paper flower. "This is for you," she whispered. Ethan stared at the delicate creation, its edges uneven but full of care. "Another one?" he asked softly, taking it gently. Lily nodded, her cheeks rosy. "So, you don't feel sad when we're not here?" The words sank into him like warmth after a long frost. He placed the flower beside the others, already forming a small bouquet on the table. His sterile room was slowly becoming a garden. Emma plopped onto the chair, swinging her legs. "Want to hear a funny story?" she asked, eyes gleaming. Ethan raised a brow, amused. "Go on." Emma launched into a tale about a clumsy neighbor's dog. She mimicked the barking, the slipping paws, the chaos of the chase. Her expressions were so dramatic that Ethan burst into laughter. The sudden sound startled even him. He had forgotten what his own laughter felt like. The nurse passing by peeked in, surprised at the noise. Sophie smiled faintly at the sight of Ethan laughing. "See? Healing isn't just medicine," she said softly. Ethan's gaze lingered on her wise eyes. "You sound older than 14, he murmured. Sophie shrugged. "Sometimes you have to be." The weight behind her words unsettled him, but also he respected it. Emma finished her story with a loud boom and threw her hands up. Lily clapped quietly, her giggle like a silver bell. Ethan shook his head, smiling despite his aching ribs. "You're better than half the comedians I've met," he teased Emma. She grinned proudly. "See? I knew I could make you laugh." The pride in her voice warmed him deeply. Laughter, something money had never truly bought him, was here. Time passed quickly in their company. Ethan forgot the ticking clock, forgot the pain in his side. Sophie kept asking about his meals, insisting he eat more. "You won't get strong if you don't finish it," she scolded lightly. Ethan rolled his eyes but obeyed, surprising himself. Never before had he listened to anyone so willingly. Emma kept bringing new stories each day, stories about school, about neighbors, about little adventures. They weren't grand tales, but they brought light. Each word painted his empty world with color. Lily's flowers piled up on the bedside table. Some were crooked, some torn, but each was precious. Ethan touched them often, almost like talismans. He found comfort in the childish folds. One morning, she brought him a tiny paper bird instead. "This one will watch over you when we go home," she explained. Ethan swallowed hard, emotions swelling in his chest. "Thank you," he whispered, more moved than he could admit. The girls exchanged smiles, content with his gratitude. For them, it was simple kindness. For him, it was salvative. Ion. The hospital room slowly transformed, not with luxury, but with life. Crayon sketches Lily drew for him were taped to the wall. Emma's laughter echoed louder than the machines. Sophie's firm words gave him determination when pain flared. It was no longer a place of sickness. It was a place of healing. Ethan realized he looked forward to their visits. The mornings felt dull until the door opened with their arrival. He counted the hours, waiting for their footsteps. His heart, once heavy with emptiness, now pulsed with expectation. At night, when they left, he stared at the flowers. He heard their voices in the quiet. He imagined Emma's stories replaying like old films. He saw Sophie's determined gaze in the dark. He felt Lily's small hand resting in his, and for the first time in decades, he didn't feel alone. Healing wasn't just physical, it was laughter, kindness, and innocence surrounding him. His broken body was mending, but more importantly, his heart was too. And that, Ethan realized, was the greater miracle. One afternoon, Sophie sat beside him, thoughtful. "You should try to walk soon," she said. Ethan arched a brow. "You think so?" "Yes," she replied firmly. "You're not weak. Don't act like it." He chuckled at her bluntness. "Bossy, aren't you?" Sophie smirked. "Someone has to be." Ethan found himself admiring her courage again. These girls weren't just visitors. They were teachers in disguise. Each gave him something money never had. Emma leaned over suddenly. When you get better, we'll take you to our secret place. Ethan blinked. Secret place? Emma grinned mischievously. Can't tell you yet. You have to heal first. Her energy was contagious, pulling him into a world of possibilities. He felt like a child again, curious and hopeful. Lily tugged at his sleeve softly. I'll make you 100 flowers if it helps, she promised. Ethan chuckled, touched beyond words. Even one is enough, he said gently. Days blurred into each other, but with every visit, his spirit grew. The sterile walls seemed less suffocating. The cold bed felt less lonely. The pain became bearable when laughter followed. The businessman who once believed only in deals now believed in little angels. Their innocence was stronger than medicine. Their love, simple and unspoken, healed wounds deeper than his injuries. Ethan Carter, the man who mocked miracles, was living one every day. And as the girls left each evening, waving goodbye, he whispered a truth to himself. I don't deserve them, but I need them. The hospital grew quieter as night draped its shadow across the city. Ethan lay in bed, his eyes drifting toward the paper flowers beside him. He thought of the girls, their laughter, their courage. For the first time in decades, he felt something close to peace. But beneath that peace, a storm brewed inside his fragile body. His chest tightened unexpectedly, sharp and unforgiving. A sudden wave of weakness spread through him. His breathing grew shallow, each inhale a battle. His fingers trembled as he reached for the call button. The machine by his bed began to scream in rapid beeps. Nurses rushed in, their faces masks of urgency. One shouted for the doctor, another checked his vitals. Ethan tried to speak, but no words came out. His throat burned, his lungs refused to obey. The world around him blurred into streaks of light and sound. Yet in the chaos, 3 small figures burst into the room. Emma, Sophie, and Lily had returned, sneaking past visiting hours. They froze for a moment, terror washing over their faces. Then, without hesitation, they ran to his side. Their little hands clutched his as though holding him to life itself. "Don't go!" Emma cried, her voice breaking. Sophie pressed closer, her jaw tight, her eyes fierce. "You're strong. You can fight this. Please fight." Lily's tears rolled silently as she whispered again and again, "Stay with us." Their voices cut through the alarms, louder than the panic around him. Ethan's fading vision cleared just enough to see them. 3 young girls, fragile but unyielding, refusing to let him slip away. He felt their warmth through his cold skin. He felt their love anchoring him to the world. And in that desperate moment he realized he wanted to live. Doctors worked quickly, adjusting tubes and medications. "Pulse dropping," one of them shouted. "We need to stabilize him now," another commanded. The room filled with urgency, but Ethan's mind clung only to the girls' voices. Their cries were louder than the machines. Their prayers were stronger than the fear. Emma leaned close, her forehead almost touching his. "You can't leave us. Not now. Not ever." Sophie squeezed his hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Lily sobbed openly, whispering, "Please, please, please." Ethan felt darkness pressing in like a closing door. He knew what it meant. His time was nearly gone. But those hands, so small yet so firm, held him at the threshold. Their love gave him something no doctor's medicine could: the will to keep fighting. His heart, fragile and failing, found a spark of strength. The flat line threatened, but then it steadied. His pulse, weak but present, returned. The doctors exchanged glances of relief. "We've got him back," one whispered. Air filled Ethan's lungs again, ragged but real. His chest rose and fell, no longer drowning in silence. His eyelids fluttered, heavy as stone, but he forced them open. The first sight he met was Lily's tear-streaked face. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You scared us." He wanted to answer, but only managed a faint squeeze of her hand. Sophie leaned close, her eyes wet but burning with pride. "I told you. You're stronger than this." Ethan swallowed weakly, his throat dry as dust. Emma wiped her face quickly, trying to hide her tears. "You can't laugh at miracles anymore," she said firmly. Ethan managed the faintest smile, a ghost of his old arrogance mixed with new humility. "You are the miracle," he rasped. The girls looked at each other, stunned by his words. For Ethan Carter, the man who denied faith, it was a confession more powerful than any deal he had ever signed. Nurses gently ushered the girls back, but they refused to let go of his hands. The doctor finally allowed them to stay, recognizing their importance. "He's stable," the doctor said softly. "Keep him calm." The girls nodded, determined. They became his protectors, guarding him with their presence. The night stretched long, but Ethan didn't feel afraid anymore. Each breath was a victory, each heartbeat a gift. The girls took turns sitting close, whispering comfort. Emma spoke with confidence, filling the silence with hope. Sophie reminded him of his strength, her words like steady anchors. Lily prayed quietly, her small hands never leaving his. Together they formed a shield stronger than medicine. Ethan realized that survival wasn't just science. It was love. Love he had never believed in until now. Love that had come from the most unexpected place. As dawn approached, the storm inside his body eased. His breathing steadied, though exhaustion weighed him down. He glanced at the three girls, their heads resting by his bed, finally asleep. They looked peaceful despite their swollen eyes. Ethan's heart swelled with something unfamiliar. Gratitude. The kind of gratitude that made his chest ache more than the pain. He closed his eyes, letting a tear slip down his cheek. A tear not of weakness, but of realization. These children had given him what billions could not: life. The nurses checked his monitors, whispering quietly. "He's recovering faster than expected," one said. Another nodded toward the girls. "Sometimes healing comes from here," she added, pointing to her heart. Ethan, though half asleep, heard the words. He knew they were true. The miracle wasn't in the machines or the medicine. The miracle was in the love of three little angels. He turned his head weakly toward them. Even in sleep, they held on to him. He remembered his past, cold offices, empty boardrooms, hollow victories. Not once in those years had anyone cared like this. Not once had he felt so wanted. It was as if fate had broken him only to rebuild him. And the builders were three children with hearts of gold. Ethan inhaled deeply, savoring the breath. It was no longer just air. It was hope. Hope given to him freely, without reason. He couldn't deny it anymore. Miracles were real. His gaze lingered on the paper flowers resting by his bed. Their bright colors stood against the sterile white. Symbols of innocence. Symbols of faith. He thought of Lily's words. "So you don't feel sad when we're not here." He realized he never truly understood until now. Those flowers had been lifelines, small promises of tomorrow. Tonight, those promises had kept him alive. Ethan Carter, once a man of disbelief, had witnessed his greatest truth. Miracles weren't myths. They had names: Emma, Sophie, and Lily. Morning sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, soft and golden. Ethan stirred, realizing the beeping of machines no longer frightened him. His lungs filled with steady air, his chest no longer fighting for breath. Doctors smiled when they checked his chart. "You're strong enough to go home soon," one said warmly. Home. The word echoed inside him, though it felt strangely unfamiliar. For years, home had meant mansions and glass towers. Now, home meant something different, something smaller, warmer. His eyes drifted to the three girls by his bed. They were playing quietly with scraps of paper, folding new shapes for him. Emma looked up first, her grin wide. "You heard that? You get to leave!" she shouted. Sophie's face lit up, though she tried to hide her relief. "Took you long enough," she teased. Lily clapped her hands, whispering, "Finally." Ethan laughed, the sound genuine and free. "Yes," he said softly. but I won't be leaving without you three." The girls blinked, unsure of what he meant. He didn't explain then, but his heart had already decided. The man who once lived only for himself would now live for them. Discharge day came quickly. The nurses wheeled him through the halls, but his eyes stayed on the girls walking beside him. They skipped ahead, their chatter filling the sterile corridors with joy. Every patient and nurse turned to look, smiling at the unlikely group. At the hospital doors, Ethan paused. The fresh air hit his face, cool and clean. For the first time in his life, he inhaled with gratitude. Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Where are you going now?" she asked. Ethan bent slightly, meeting her gaze. "To make things right," he said. They didn't understand yet, but they would. Instead of heading to his limousine, Ethan followed the girls to their neighborhood. His polished shoes crunched against cracked sidewalks. The streets were narrow, lined with broken fences and tired houses. He saw children playing with worn-out toys, their laughter covering the hardship. The girls led him proudly, unashamed of where they lived. Sophie pointed to a small, crumbling house. "That's ours," she said simply. Ethan's chest tightened at the sight. The roof sagged, the paint peeled, and the windows rattled in their frames. Yet inside, voices greeted them warmly. Their mothers came forward, faces weary but kind. They thanked Ethan for surviving, unaware of how much he owed their daughters. He bowed his head slightly, humbled. For the first time, he felt smaller than the people in front of him. Emma pulled him to the kitchen, showing him a wobbly table where they ate meals. Sophie opened a cupboard that held little more than bread. Lily shyly offered him a chipped cup of water. His throat tightened as he accepted it. That night, Ethan sat awake in his own mansion. The silence felt heavier than ever. He thought of the girls' laughter, their courage, their unshakable love. His fortune, his empire, all of it felt meaningless without them. For the first time, he admitted aloud, money is nothing without love. And so he made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. The next morning, construction crews arrived at the girls' street. Neighbors gathered, whispering in shock. Ethan stepped out of his car, plans in hand. He rebuilt their house first, brick by brick, turning it into a safe haven. Windows that didn't rattle, a roof that wouldn't leak, bright walls painted in colors chosen by the girls themselves, a kitchen stocked with food, cupboards filled to the brim. Their mothers wept with gratitude, unable to believe it was real. But Ethan wasn't done. He arranged scholarships for Emma, Sophie, and Lily. "Education is your key," he told them. "You'll never have to struggle the way I once did." The girls hugged him, their joy beyond words. Days turned into weeks, and his visits became routine. He read Emma's essays, clapping proudly at her wit. He helped Sophie with math, marveling at her sharp mind. He listened patiently to Lily's shy stories, encouraging her dreams. They filled his once-empty life with laughter and purpose. He discovered the joy of simple meals shared at a crowded table. He learned the peace of hearing children's laughter echoing through his mansion. He found himself smiling at small things, sunsets, jokes, paper flowers, things he had once ignored in the pursuit of wealth. Now they were treasures. The business world noticed his change. Board members whispered about his softened demeanor. Employees marveled at his kindness. He no longer measured success in profits, but in people. At charity events, he spoke not of numbers, but of love. "The greatest investment," he declared once, "is in hearts, not accounts." His words shocked the crowd, but they were genuine. The girls sat proudly in the front row, clapping louder than anyone. Ethan's eyes shone as he looked at them. His miracles, his angels. As seasons passed, his bond with the girls deepened. He became more than a benefactor. He became family. He attended their school plays, cheering the loudest. He bandaged scraped knees after bicycle falls. He listened to teenage worries, offering wisdom and patience. They filled his days with warmth, his nights with peace. The man who once scoffed at miracles now lived among them. He carried their laughter like a shield. He wore their love like armor. and he gave back every ounce of it, freely. One afternoon, a journalist asked him what had changed him. Cameras flashed, microphones waited for his usual polished reply. But Ethan didn't talk about business strategies or market wins. He didn't speak of boardrooms or deals. Instead, his eyes softened, his voice low but steady. "I met 3 angels," he said simply. "Not in heaven, not in dreams, in a hospital." The audience grew silent. "They saved my life when I had nothing left, and they taught me that miracles are real." Reporters scribbled, stunned by his vulnerability. His words traveled farther than any headline about money ever had. People saw a man transformed not by fortune, but by love. Ethan Carter was no longer just a millionaire CEO. He was a living testimony of compassion. At home, Emma, Sophie, and Lily giggled as they watched the news. "He's talking about us," Emma whispered proudly. Sophie smirked. "Of course he is." Lily hugged her paper flowers tightly, whispering, "We really are his miracles." And Ethan, standing behind them with tears in his eyes, knew it was true.